Good morning. Our chapter today is about overview of the labor market. This chapter is classified into three main parts. Part number one is related to the basic concepts and definitions of labor market. And part number two is related to how labor market works. And finally, part number three shows some applications of theory. Let's start with part number one. Let's start the story from the beginning that we would like to produce a product. So we have to ask ourselves three main questions: what to produce, how to produce it, who gets what is produced, or for whom. So we have to answer three main questions. What, how, and for whom. What to produce, how, and for whom. So after identification of what which is based on human needs and wants, we are going to get the available resources in order to be able to produce the commodity, and allocate these resources through production process in order to be produced and then distributed to households. So in order to answer this question, which is how, we have to refer back to the circular flow model. As we said in the circular flow model, that there are four sectors in the economy and three types of markets: household, firms, government, and rest of the world. While with respect to the three markets, they are factor market, goods and services market, and finally financial market. So in order to answer the second question, which is how, so we are going to connect household with firms and the two markets, goods and services market and factor market, as household are going to provide their services through factor market to firms and get income in return. Factor market is a labor market. Firms are going to use services of factors of production to produce goods and services, which are going to be sold in the goods and services market. And households are going to buy or spend their money income on goods and services, which is known as consumption expenditure. So this part is related to answering the three questions: what to produce goods and services, what are the goods and services, how. So we are going to provide our services through factor market to firms and get income in return. For whom firms are going to provide their goods, produced goods and services to household through goods and services market. So this part is related to answering the three main questions. Now we are going to focus mainly on the factor market, as labor market is factor market. Okay, so let's move on to the first part of our chapter, which is the labor market basic concepts and definition. What's meant by labor market? Labor market is the market that allocates workers to jobs and coordinates employment decision so labor market is the market that connects producers with job seekers. Okay, it can be national labor market at a national level, or regional labor market, or external labor market, or internal labor market. So these are different classifications of labor market. It can be national or regional, or external or internal. Also, we have to differentiate between primary market and secondary market. Primary market is the market that generally consists of high wage paying jobs. Social security, and longer lasting careers. But it's also defined as jobs that require formal education. While secondary market is a market consisting of high turnover, low paying jobs, part-time jobs, or temporary jobs. The labor force and unemployment. What's meant by labor force? Returning back to total population, returning back to what we have said before, the total population is classified into two main groups: working age group and others. Working age group are people from 16 to 64. Others are younger or elder people. Working age group is classified into labor force and not in the labor force. Labor force is classified into employed and unemployed people. So total labor force is the summation of employed and unemployed people. So in order to be counted as unemployed, an individual must seek a job or made an effort to find a job within the previous 4 weeks. Number two, waiting to be called back for a job. Number three, waiting to start a new job. Within 30 days. يبقى in order to be counted as unemployed person, you have to make an effort to find a job. Number two, waiting to be called back for a job within 30 days, or waiting to start a new job within 30 days. There are three main indicators related to labor market. They are unemployment rate, which is calculated as number of people unemployed divided by labor force multiplied by 100. Number two, employment to population ratio, and it's calculated as number employed divided by working age group multiplied by 100. Number three, labor force participation ratio, which is calculated as labor force divided by working age group multiplied by 100. What are the labor market dynamics with respect to labor force and not in the labor force, and with respect to employed and unemployed? So the labor market is very dynamic, as there is a movement or flows between labor force and not in the labor force, in terms of those who leave the labor force by retiring or by dropping out. At the same time, there are new entrants to the labor force, people who have never worked before, or people who dropped out and we would like to return or to re-enter the labor market once again. This is with respect to the labor force and not in the labor force. And number two, with respect to movement or flow between employed and unemployed. Employed workers become unemployed by quitting voluntary or being laid off involuntary. At the same time, there are the number of unemployed people is going to change, as some of the unemployed workers can find a job or being newly hired in a better job or being recalled for a job once again. So this means that the unemployment rate is going to change from time to time and from one country to another or from one region to another. Also, the labor force is going to change over time and from one point of time to another or from one region to another.